Good evening, everyone. My name is Colin Ziegler. I am the serving chair for the Somerville Biosafety Committee. Um, Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this public meeting will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of this meeting will be made available along with the minutes on our website, somervillema.gov/biosafety. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We have a couple of items tonight. Not a super busy agenda, but some interesting discussion items that have come up within the past month, as well as a update to some questions we had on a permit. So I'd like to go ahead and move to item number 1, which is the review of the Tufts University application revisions. Do I have a second? Second, seeing one. I think we can dive right in. We'll wait for Karen to finish joining. And Karen's connecting to audio. Perfect. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining us. We're diving into the Tufts application revisions, which committee members have been sent ahead of time. I wanted to open up discussion with anyone having questions, comments, concerns about this. Based on my review, it looks like they have made the edits that we were requesting, which was updating contact information for emergency response, including Somerville Biosafety Ordinance language and link, as well as just references that they are operating within Somerville and listing the actual location, which was helpful. But any other additional questions, comments, concerns on the application? All right, seeing none, I am going to move. Oh, Michael's joining as well. All right, so we got a full house, almost a full committee tonight. I love this. This is great. Thank you all for your commitment. I love this. We'll wait for Michael to join. Michael, can you hear us?
Yes.
Excellent. So Mike, just to go back on what I was saying, any questions, comments, or concerns about the Tufts application revisions that we received a couple weeks ago? No? Yeah, I think it included everything that we needed. So I'm going to move to vote for application completion. Do I see a second? Awesome. All right, I will now take the vote. Francine Rogers.
Abstain.
Karen Carroll.
Approved.
William Hallahan. Alex Vera.
I abstain.
Rachel Nadkarni.
Yes.
And Michael Swickus.
Yes.
Excellent. With 4 yeses and 2 abstains, that motion is passed. The application is approved. They'll receive approval through the CitizenServe portal along with their physical permit for the year 2024 until 2025. Excellent. All right, I will mark that. Thank you, everyone. Now I'd like to move to item number 2, which is the review of animal testing and research policies within the city. Do I have a second? Seeing a couple seconds. So this question has come up sporadically in my time here at the committee, with the committee. And I think it's time for us to start having that discussion. I don't think the intention for tonight is for anything definitive to come out or any sort of language or ordinance or amendment changes to be proposed. But I really wanted to start the discussion as the city doesn't have anything on the books directly relating to research and development and treatment of animals. However, when we look over at our neighbors at the city of Cambridge, which of course has many more operations of biosafety or biological research and development situations occurring, they do have a process in place as well as requirements for facilities to produce documentation and meet certain standards when it comes to the treatment of animals during their experiences being tested on. So I've been in discussions with the city of Cambridge and specifically Aaron Bryant Hall, who's their commissioner of laboratory animals, on how they approach these issues. Any facility that is operating with animal testing occurring as a part of the process, those applications are actually funneled directly to her. So she sees this process, from start to finish. So she has been an excellent resource in providing some background information on how Cambridge approaches it and potentially how we could emulate it if it's something that we wanted to pursue in the future. Um, I She actually presented me with a quick presentation, and I'm going to share that with the group, and we'll just quickly go through it. And here it is. Share. All right. Can everybody see that? Excellent. Great. So here's the presentation that Aaron had given last year to their committee, which is outlining the history, comparing the ordinance to existing federal regulations, the ordinance language that they have, the permitting and inspection process, as well as actions that have been taken by surrounding municipalities that should also be on our radar. I'm going to zoom in a bit, actually. Is this kind of, yeah, there we go. So they're the first city to do it. So of course they've set the standard and continue to do so in many ways. So just something for us to understand. We might be a little bit behind the curve, but in reality, we haven't had much of this type of research occurring, or any of this type of research occurring within the city as of yet. So the existing regulations, so we have the Animal Welfare Act and regulations that are under the USDA. It's for private funding situations, covers all warm-blooded animals except mice and rats of a certain genera, and bird breeds for research and farm animals used for agricultural research. It applies to all research institutions within the covered species. There's also the PHS policy and the HREA, the Guide for Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, which is all vertebrate species. It covers rats, mice, birds, fish, and all those species covered. And it's only applicable to research receiving federal funding. So under the NIH, similar to other requirements and the guidelines and design requirements and the BNB. So, great. And then also, ensuring that they're meeting certain standards to meet journals, standards to be published and reported on and those types of things. Oh, Rachel is back in the waiting room. Okay, great. All right. So within Cambridge, their ordinance, chapter 6-12 of the care and use of laboratory animals, covers some of this as well. And I think we could borrow this language, basically copy and paste. But yeah, let's see. So the commissioner is appointed by the city manager. They can't have any association with biomedical research. They have to have a deep understanding of, animal care world and understanding the policies and procedures that are appropriate for this type of work. And again, harking back to the requirements for state and federal guidelines, ensuring that their ordinance is also including those requirements. So, and so they also have to file the institutions have to file reports with them as well, and that there are penalties associated with incorrect procedure or not reporting. It includes an annual visit that's unannounced, and then one meeting with the chair of that particular institution, unaffiliated members, and then inspection and documentation reports. And Erin was nice enough to produce some of those reports in her inspection lists for us, just to get an idea of what she does on a day-to-day basis at some of these facilities. And I'll be sure to provide those to folks as requested. They're very interesting to see. Let's see. They go through the permitting process similar to how we would approach it on CitizenServe. They use OpenGov, which is a little different, but the functions essentially the same. It also ensures that they're maintaining documentation for deficiencies, minor, significant notes, recommendations, suggestions for consideration, all of which can be currently done on our Citizen Serve portal and is used for other types of ordinance requirements and permitting. Here's the first page of the post-inspection report. Again, going back to the deficiencies, listing them out, and that the facility acknowledges that these are occurring and that they're willing, or they're providing a timeline for correction. And then again, back to same sort of language associated with visits and reporting, and attending various webinars and conferences and things. So for the commissioner, of course. But I wanted to talk about the surrounding towns and get to this a little bit. So as we know, Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Watertown, lots of life sciences, biomedical research interest, and it's becoming more so. And then we have Everett, which actually banned animal lab research. Suffolk Downs, in review of the Suffolk Downs development plan, I believe also followed through with a ban or has considered that for that particular development. Lexington was planning on duplicating Cambridge's ordinance, but they're unsure of the current status. I haven't followed up on that as to whether or not Lexington has pursued a similar ordinance language, but it's just something for us to consider. With Everett banning it, it is something that can occur, and I think it'd be interesting to dive into whether or not the amount of interest in doing research in Everett has increased, decreased, stayed the same. I'm really interested to understand that. And I'd be, if anyone has any background knowledge of that they'd like to present, that would be excellent. And that's the end of the presentation. And of course, I'm going to add this, to the meeting profile, as well as, hand it out to all committee members for their review. This won't be the last time we're going to be talking about this, I'm sure. I just wanted to present that early on to get folks thinking about this issue, to present in the future. But any questions, comments, or concerns off the bat anyone has? I see Karen first.
Oh, we got a few hands. Okay, great. I just had a few questions about the process. In Cambridge, other than the permitting and the annual inspections and some of those smaller things, have they passed regulations that are much different than what the feds in the state require? Or is the main advantage to doing these local regs that you just have some compliance going on?
I'm actually going to recognize Julia. Julia and I met recently, and she's really dived into this sort of overlap of federal, state, and then local regulations. So Julia, if you'd like to provide some perspective, that'd be great.
Hi. So actually, first, nice to meet all of you. I'm the environmental policy manager over at OSC. I don't think I've met the vast majority of any of you, so really nice to meet you virtually, that is. And our ears must have been ringing because I was actually putting my hand up earlier to comment on a very similar aspect of that. So yeah, from what I'm able to tell, and granted, I did do a deep dive on this, but I could have missed a few things. But from what I can tell, the biggest difference between the Cambridge policy and what's already existing at the state and the federal level is that the Cambridge one is a little bit more strict by both, like in terms of both of those policies. It does emphasize more local oversight. It makes a committee to do the overview of all of this mandatory, and then it also establishes penalties for violation, none of which are mandatory at the state or federal level. I do want to pinpoint or point out that there are two policies at the state level right now that are going through the legislature on this topic. The first one is an act to provide additional funding for animal welfare and safety programming. And that's exactly what it sounds like. The language that was included on the docket is only 2 paragraphs, so there's really not too much information around that, but it does say that, sorry, bear with me for 1 second. There would be an animal prevention and care fund that would be established, but it doesn't say what that would be used for or any of the information around it. The other bill that was on the docket is an act relative to the humane protection of animals, and that one is a little bit more extensive in the information that's available. It would require a task force to systematically review all of the laws pertaining to animal cruelty and protection, as well as focusing on creating misdemeanor animal cruelty statutes. It would also include, new sections to Chapter 140 of the general laws, imposing fines for using puppies and kittens in lab spaces, as well as also selling them and using them in other commercial areas. It also provides more definitions around what cruel conditions qualify as, because there isn't really an existing definition at the state level. And it does a few other things as well, but still the difference between that and the existing policies in Cambridge is that this policy would not have penalties associated as it is written right now. That was a lot of information, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's what I was interested in. So thank you,
course.
Julia. And I'm presuming this would be regulations passed by the Board of Health regs, not a city ordinance or something, or do we know?
How they're doing it in Cambridge?
Yeah, or just what we would need to do here in Somerville.
So I'm not sure exactly how Cambridge does it, and I'm not 100% sure how it would be done in Somerville, but my assumption is that it could be done through the Board of Health regulations. Because I do know there was just a bunch of regulations that were adopted back in 2021, became effective in 2022, I believe, but none of the health matters included animal welfare or animal
Okay.
testing.
Great, thank you, Julia and Colin, for that
Yeah,
presentation.
thank you, Julia and Karen. I think that was a really productive sort of conversation about, where we could go next and what's out there currently. Michael, you are recognized.
Thank you. I just wonder what Somerville's capacity is for conducting inspections. Would we need to hire somebody? Do we have the resources currently? Do we have the expertise in the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something I'm looking into from the inspectional services side. We do not have that capacity right now. The only inspections really being conducted are those initial visits that we've done to permittees or people applying. And that's me meeting with them. The regular oversight, is something that we need to look at. And if we were to do something like this, we would need someone like Aaron Bryant Hall over in Cambridge to be doing this more intensive inspection process, especially with concerns of animal welfare. So it's something we'll have to propose. And I think this committee does have the capacity to make recommendations to the mayor's office and city council about priorities and staffing and ordinance changes. So we have the ability to do so.
Let me also ask, do we know how many facilities currently exist in the city that would be subject to this?
None that we are aware of or that have applied. No ABSL within the city. Are you done? Sorry, Michael. Is there anything else? Any additional?
Yeah, no, thank you. That was it.
Great. Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I agree. We would definitely need to add staffing to do this, depending on the numbers, unless we were banning it outright, and then there's no staffing needed if we just, like Everett or one of those towns that doesn't allow it. The other thing to look at with any of these new regs, new inspections, new permits is that the fee should cover the true cost. So if we only, had a small number, there could be a fee that contracted with someone like the Cambridge person to come once a year and do our inspection of one or two places. So yeah, but it's definitely part of what needs to be thought through. So I appreciate the comment, Michael. So often we add regulations and things and don't really think through the related costs and who's going to do the work. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Karen. Julia?
Once again, and forgive me if you already said this, Colin, this might be the Iron Man that you mentioned who's doing all the work. But in Cambridge, the ordinance did also require the city manager to appoint a commissioner of laboratory animals to do a lot of that oversight and care as well and provide capacity in that sense. Sorry if that's the person you were referring to.
Yep, that's perfect. Yep, that is absolutely true. And Cambridge's governance structure is a little different than ours, but I'm sure we can make it work. There are various responsibilities throughout the city. I'm sure someone could do it. Anyone else have any additional comments, questions, concerns? Has anyone talked to their neighbors about this? Hearing any rumblings about concerns amongst folks? No?
I would say that I would be very wary of an outright ban. I think if part of the goal of this committee and part of the goal of Somerville is to attract more biotech, uh, you know, even if a company is not interested in doing animal testing themselves, if we hang out a big sign that says we don't like animal testing, that could serve as a red flag for companies that might be interested in doing other kinds of biotech work in Somerville. So I would be very much against an outright ban.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Rachel.
Yeah, I want to second what Michael is saying. I think we have this burgeoning life sciences economy, and I do think we were trying to be open, and also we don't know the specifics of what this is until we have that conversation with the company. Right? It could be very benign, right? It could be, you know, behavioral testing that's like as part of a psychology lab, right? Like we don't know what that looks like yet. Sorry, Colin, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rachel. I think that's an excellent point. Francine, sorry to put you on the spot here, but I wanted to get your perspective on ABSL laboratories and how common are they? It's not something we see here in Somerville yet, but down the road, I mean, will we?
When you are looking at them, I mean, ABSL1 is very common. I mean, that is the typical level that you would note for work with any type of non-infectious agents. Even like behavioral is listed as being like ABSL1. I would say that for higher levels, ABSL2, it's not as common. I mean, we do have them at Tufts, but they're not the majority of our rooms. And then ABSL3 even rarer. But again, we have some of that, but not not a lot. We have very, very few animal protocols for that level.
Thank you, Francine. Appreciate the perspective. And it's my understanding that the higher biosafety level you're reaching with ABSL, the more complex organisms you're working with, the more complex species you're working with, which, you know, folks might have this moral compass as to which animals can be and can't be tested, and that's muddying waters even further. So
I would not say that. The ABSL matches to the biosafety. So you're looking at the risk group of whatever you're putting into the agent. You could have work with non-human primates that would be, they are using them, probably not the best example would be too because of herpes B, but you could have a more complex animal such as like a sow that would be a lower biosafety level. So more complex in terms of evolutionary scale, but it could still be a lower biosafety level. It really does. It comes down to the agents and the materials that you're using. It's the same as the biosafety labs themselves.
thank you, Francine. Any other questions, comments, or concerns about this? Or Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, my sense of it is what are the specifics that we would be looking for that aren't already being like sought out by their federal and like by all the others who are regulating their industry, or like their research, right? And not only just the regulatory space, but also the like the science themselves, right? Like to me, the thing that stands out is like, what does it matter relative to the neighborhood, right? Like what does it matter relative to like how the facility functions in its environs, right? And so to me, it's like, okay, like not saying my knowledge of this is very, very limited, for sure, but right, like if someone was doing experiments that involved dogs, right? Like, do those dogs have access to the outdoors, right? Like, do we have like what's the light and air? What's the kenneling circumstance? Again, I'm using dogs as the example because kennels are often regulated in zoning. But the zoning requirements that go with kennels are typically related to how not only is the welfare, but also what is that link back to what is that impact in the neighborhood, right? And so kenneling for that type of an animal that might make a lot of noise is what the rationale for the existence of that zoning regulation. And so to me, there is that is why it exists as a zoning rule in a lot of municipalities, is to think about that neighborhood impact. That is a very different lens than the state and federal regulators are going to bring. And that's where I'm trying to figure out what our value add is to the community versus these other regulatory agencies.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, making sure there isn't redundancy. I think, like Cambridge, this is just to add that extra layer of oversight to ensure that there's structure for violations. Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely things to consider, Rachel. Thank you. Francine.
And I can't figure out how to raise my hand. They're playing off of what Rachel had said. It might be something to consider looking at. So she had mentioned dogs. Dogs are a USDA covered species. So there are a lot of regulations that the USDA would require. But if you do look at mice and rats, which are not a USDA species, maybe it's layering in protections so that we're providing coverage where there may not be, because biotech might not need to have a lot of approvals in place in order to work with the lower mammals, but they would if they were working with the USDA covered, and we could potentially add protection for the community, protection even for the animals, for those other species that do not already have strict requirements.
Thank you, Francine. Karen.
I mean, a lot of times we do these kind of regulations, the permitting, and then the process of annual inspections, because the feds and the state don't really do it. So I don't know how well and how, if the federal, government is inspecting and checking out. Also, it allows us at a local level, when there are neighborhood complaints, it often prevents complaints in the first place if the town knows about it and make sure that regulations are followed. And so it's kind of leverage often for the business or the community that to protect both sides, to make sure that things are in place and being followed. So if neighbors get upset, there is something in place that they have adhered to. And but I would be interested to know how well and if the federal and state folks do come by and do the inspections.
Thank you, Karen. Julia.
Thank you, Colin. So again, I'm still digging into it, so I don't quote me 100% on this one, but from what I can tell, right now there is no concrete like reporting system or things along those lines associated with the federal policies. The federal policies act more of establishing guidelines and requirements, and also, excuse me, what's what I'm looking for. There are regular inspections, but they're not as frequent as Cambridge's. And again, there's no reporting structure that's in mind. So it's much less frequent. Whereas Cambridge does have an annual reporting structure that they have to do that has several different details, including the animal species, number of species, conditions, health monitoring, et cetera.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, any other questions, comments, or concerns about this? I know this is a very sort of baseline discussion about this. There's nothing particularly concrete, but it's very helpful. I've learned a lot already. So thank you all. Yeah, Alex.
I was just wondering if if there was a possibility where you could just limit, the type of animals that they can do research on, limit it to, mice or other model organisms. So, so you're not inviting any research on panda bears or, because I would think that, that would cover most of the types of research anyone would really want to do. Because just politically, it could get hot if people are working with dogs and cats and things.
Yeah, absolutely. People definitely have, very visceral responses to animal testing and particular types of animals. Could you imagine if they were, testing on pandas? Oh.
Yeah.
Julia.
Sorry, I just want to correct myself quickly. I misspoke. Or actually I was wrong. I was back in my notes. So currently federal requirements, typically institutions do submit annual reports. So they are already doing that. What's different in the Cambridge ordinance is that they are doing it more frequently, and the ordinance actually does not specify exactly how frequently these inspections occur. That was in the ordinance said to be determined by the Animal Care and Use Committee in Cambridge, which I didn't see. I haven't come across what that time frame or frequency of reporting is for it, but I'm assuming it is more frequent than once a year. Sorry about that confusion.
No, thank you, Julia. Thanks for that correction. Great. Any other questions, comments, concerns? No? All right. Seeing none, I'd like to move to our third and final item, which is the discussion of appointing a citizen chair. Do I have a second? Great. All right, seeing one, let's move on. So, as we can tell, this committee is currently very heavily skewed towards city staff, which serves a purpose of the city being able to process these permits and talk internally about departmental responsibilities and take actions when actions are needed for this particular topic. However, I think this committee also serves an important purpose of connecting the community and expertise more broadly and understanding this industry, how it functions, as well as the priorities of the communities themselves, and ensuring that, safety measures are being taken and communication is very clear between community members and the industry. So I would find it really interesting, or probably more effective, to have someone with the expertise, which I do not have as a chair, and background in biosafety work, which I do not have, as well as the connection to the community and holding that position of representation. So I've looked at some job descriptions for how they function within IBCs. I haven't really found one for from the municipal side of things, but they would serve the purpose of bringing issues to the table, discussing them more in depth, as well as providing resources and connections to trainings and additional resources. It's difficult for me on my end, just from a personal side, to be the chair and liaison for the committee at the same time. So that would free me up to do more things like intensive meeting minutes and, working with the chair and connecting them to industry experts and, providing you all with trainings and connections to other things. So I just wanted to put it out there, get any feedback on that. And, if that seems reasonable to people, looking to develop a job description by our next meeting, deciding on that and, sending it out to the public and helping with reviewing and interviewing candidates for that position, and hopefully get that filled within the next year or so, or by the end of the year, fingers crossed. So any thoughts on that?
Colin? Sorry.
You're muted, Colin.
I did it again. Go ahead, William. Sorry.
Hey, are any other communities doing stuff like that? Do they have a citizen person?
So Cambridge doesn't. Sam Lipson, who actually worked for the city of Cambridge, is chairing their committee. I haven't looked at other committees in their structure or communities in their biosafety committee structure. I think this would be new for the area. And then Karen.
Yeah, I was just going to agree that it's very hard to be the liaison and be taking the minutes and doing some of the follow-up as well as chairing the meeting. And I know, is this a subcommittee of the Board of Health? So
Yes.
should one of them be on the committee as a chair?
If I'm remembering our ordinance language, is that the committee members directly elect the chair.
Okay.
So we have that ability to be a little more flexible.
This committee
This
directly
committee,
elects.
this
Okay.
committee can elect. Yes,
Yeah, no, I would support that. It sounds reasonable.
great. Rachel.
One question, Colin, do you know if this is a committee that is being, where citizen members are going through the, I forget what the acronym stands for, the AABC.
Oh.
There's a group that's reviewing volunteer participants in different committees. Is this one of the bodies that is being, where candidates are vetted through that process?
Karen, I'll refer to you on that one.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, the Board of Health members are going through the AAC committee, and we have 2 members about to go before them. I have not heard anything about this committee, and again, it sounds like as a subcommittee of the Board of Health with its own rules to be able to elect its own chair. I don't know, how did this committee get chosen? How do people get on this committee?
So the ordinance language essentially lists out departments to have representatives to serve as liaisons for their departments. And then on top of that, it has community members that are then, vetted, like Michael and Francine and Alex. They all went through the interview process and were vetted and then appointed through a vote. That's how it occurs here. We were working with the mayor's office and the clerk's office in developing standardizing a process because there's nothing really set in stone for us. We'll go through that process again of public notification, interview, review, and then vote within committee. So you could follow a similar vein, but again, nothing formal. And actually, this might be something by our next meeting. I'll propose some language within our policies and procedures for us to adopt the appointment process of committee members. We might want to include that, or we should include that.
And I can send you what we were using in a couple of other committees that we manage. They're a
Great.
little bit different.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel.
The folks on, certainly I feel like Francine and Alex and Michael, the expertise that you all bring as members of this industry is so critical.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. That would be very helpful. And I know you work with a number of committees, and having citizen representation on there is very, very helpful for sure. But no, that's all I really wanted to talk about for that topic. Does anyone else have any additional context or comments that they'd like to make on that, or who we should be looking for? Should it be folks industry adjacent, or well, they would have to, of course, abstain if anything came through that they were, or related to. But yeah, just something to think about for the next meeting. Great. So if there aren't any more questions, comments, or concerns, I'd like to move to adjourn the meeting, and we'll meet again probably in June, as we are going to be receiving more renewals for all our current permit holders. Very exciting time of the year for everybody. So I'd like to move to adjourn. Do I have a second? Seeing. All right. With that, the meeting is adjourned. I'll register the votes. We'll get that permit sent out to Tufts, and I'll send everyone more information about the upcoming meeting in the next month or so. All right.
Thank you, Colin.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Happy Memorial Day,
Thanks.
everyone.